Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Apollo 13, see also Apollo 11 moon landing. Contact Report 527.
But the fact that after the fraud of the alleged moon landing on the 20th of July 1969 by NASA, 5 moon flights and also moon landings took place after all. That is true, or?
Yes, with the space vehicles 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
But you now mention 6, so something does not add up.
You also notice everything, and so I cannot be silent any longer, also because there is a greater security for you today. There were indeed 6 moon flights and 6 moon landings, but one moon landing was unofficial and was hidden from the world public by another fraud. The company with the Apollo 13 spacecraft on the 11th of April 1970 was in fact another fraud, because the device was actually landed on the moon in the area Mare Tranquillitatis, where Apollo 11 is said to have landed during the operation on the 20th of July 1969. However, the stay after the landing on the lunar surface was so short that the necessary for the first deception could be done, and therefore the duration from the beginning to the end of the whole Apollo 13 operation was also ultimately limited to a few days. The time of the return to Earth was also faked, according to which the total time of the action was not 143 hours, respectively, a few minutes less than 6 full days, as was claimed, but sometime more. In contrast to all other companies, where dozens of lunar orbits were made, there was an extremely small number in this action. The time required was precisely calculated and was just sufficient to carry out the landing, set footprints and landing lanes, leave the necessary things behind, and then make the return flight. The whole thing was an extremely fast action to be able to claim that not a moon landing had taken place. And this deceitful lie was also spread all over the world when the return to Earth had taken place successfully. And this lie has survived until today. So the whole undertaking lasted only a very short time, but this was possible because this Apollo mission failed to do much of what had to be done on other Apollo missions. The fraudulent moon flight and moon landing operation of the 20th of July 1969 lasted longer, 195 hours and about 20 minutes respectively, little more than 8 days. This time was taken up because, on the one hand, the alleged flight time to the moon and back to Earth had to be taken into account, but also the fraudulent filming, and on the other hand, the faked landing of the alleged moon returnees took up much more time, and also unforeseen difficulties had to be overcome, which could not be foreseen. In fact, the launch of a rocket had to take place openly in order to keep up appearances to the public, and on the other hand, a fake landing of the astronauts also had to be faked. But as far as the alleged failure of a moon landing of Apollo 13 is concerned, the whole fraud was only arranged in order to leave the necessary footprints and things of the alleged landing of Apollo 11 at the landing site on the moon respectively in the Mare Tranquillitatis, which are to be found once in the new millennium, when new moon landings by the USA, Russia, or China, etc. will take place. It can be said that, in foresight, this possibility was already being considered and acted upon, the mother of hope being that it could then be clearly proven that the alleged moon landing of Apollo 11 on the 20th of July 1969 was not a fraud, but a fact. This should also prove that claims are not true, that the USA had faked the Apollo 11 moon landing only to gain an advantage over the Soviet Union in the space program and in terms of military and technical possibilities.
Ingenious, but the whole of the Apollo 13. Mission is as monstrous as the fraud of the alleged moon landing of the mission of the 20th of July 1969, because also with the fraud that Apollo 13 could not have landed on the moon due to serious damage, but did land nevertheless, the whole terrestrial mankind was and still is today being fooled. What I do not understand, however, is why you did not tell me about it, because I would certainly not have divulged anything about it.
It was for your own safety, which was more important than information.
What do you want me to say? I do not know how such information would have been related to my safety, but I accept what you say without further question.
It is obvious that you are also not interested, and that is a good thing, because a corresponding explanation would again cause more opponents against you. This will probably already happen through my explanation regarding the second big fraud of NASA and the USA, which also came about in cooperation with certain U.S. government officials, as well as the one regarding the alleged moon landing of the 20th of July 1969. The Apollo 13 scam, like Apollo 11, also involved drugs and hypnotic machinations, which influenced all involved to forget and to accept false experiences. Thus, false memories were created among the participants, but also important memories were erased from their memory. So, since then, the important persons have been living under these conditions and will also do so until the end of their lives, as long as they are still alive now. Consequently, a lifelong silence is also guaranteed in this respect because the important memories of the moon landing and its activities were hypnotically erased. Now you know that this also happened with the Apollo 13 crew, which consisted of Hayes, Lovell, and Swigert. However, if there is a danger that persons involved might fall out of post-hypnosis, or that the drug effects would be ineffective against expectation and the persons concerned would talk, then they will fall prey to arranged fatal diseases or accidents or suicide.
You told me this in the Apollo 11 scam? And so I know that it is also the case with the Apollo 13 scam. But what about all those hundreds, or maybe even thousands, of technicians and crews and observers who were in the control center on the radio and on the screens, etc., watching everything that was supposed to have happened?
This was really the easiest exercise in deception, because all the participants, observers, technicians and other staff, etc., were misled by fake radio messages and images of deception transferred to the monitors, and consequently they were all under the false assumption that everything was real and corresponded to reality and truth. Thus, only those directly involved and a handful of radio, electronic, television, and film technicians and the perpetrators of the frauds were involved in everything. Apart from the initiators, all those directly involved underwent drug treatment and in-depth hypnosis, with the 4 persons who carried out the treatments then falling victim to fatal accidents in a short period of time. Only the actual perpetrators escaped unscathed, and some of them have also died in the last 40 years, so only a few of them are still alive today. But they too, like those who have already died, will keep their secret, which is absolutely certain.
Contact Report 688.
Your effort would have been the chance for all of Earth's humanity to finally be able to win a real and lasting world peace. But this was not in the mind of the U.S. powers and their supporters, so also not of the secret services and the military of every kind. Deception and lying as well as intrigues and crimes are also part of their profession, as is also the case with NASA, which to this day claims and therefore lies that the fictitious moon flight with Apollo 11 on the 20th of July 1969 took place. Consequently, the real flight with Apollo 12 took place, after which the next official landing on the moon took place on the 19th of November 1969. The alleged Apollo 11 rocket, you explained at the time, was indeed shot up, but without a crew, after which the landing capsule was jettisoned again and returned to Earth, while the astronauts remained on the ground and experienced the alleged lunar adventure under hypnosis or post-hypnotic influence. However, with a later moon flight, it was probably with Apollo 13 on the 11th of April 1970, a manned moon landing actually took place, during which the tracks were then set that were supposedly made by the Apollo 11 moon landing. This created a second lie, because officially it was and still is claimed that, on the way to the moon, the landing had to be cancelled due to an explosion on board the Apollo spacecraft, and therefore only a half-moon orbit with subsequent return to Earth was carried out. The crew, so you told me, had also been post-hypnotically treated with a false memory after their return to Earth, following which they were made to believe and set a false memory that they had just made one orbit of the moon.
That is correct, but in this respect it should not be necessary to talk about it again.